Hello and welcome to the Talking About podcasts brought to you by ARU's Counselling and Wellbeing team. Talking About is a space to openly discuss the topic of wellbeing and mental health in a way that puts our students' thoughts and feelings at the forefront. My name is Lucas Oliver and I'm a counsellor at ARU. I'm joined today by Sarah Armstrong, a current forensic science student and peer wellbeing mentor at ARU. In this episode, we're going to be talking about stress and resilience. So I'm delighted to be here today on the subject of stress and resilience. My name is Lucas Oliver, and I'm delighted to say hello to Sarah Armstrong.
Hi.
You have particular interest, obviously, in stress and resilience, and you noted something when we met outside the Eye Centre today about stress. And that word came up amongst the student population?
Yes, I was saying walking into campus and sort of coming to this room, it was really funny to hear how many students were kind of saying, I'm stressed, I feel stressed. I heard one particular student walk out of a lecture hall and be like, it's too stressful, I don't want to go back in. And yeah, no, it's an area of particular interest for me. And it's, I think, something that we see amongst the student population, particularly when you're being like tested and with assessments. So no, yeah, it's definitely an area of interest.
So, and you heard that word buzzing around. So let's get to grips with it, shall we?
Yeah. So I think kind of a good place to start is what is stress? Because as you say, you hear it all the time. I'm stressed. I feel stressed. And like even coming in today, recording this podcast, it felt kind of stressful because it's something new. So like what would be a good definition of stress?
Well, actually, what did you notice, Sarah, in showing up in your own body and feelings with the stress this morning?
Well, for me, stress is a very kind of like physical thing. That's kind of how I would define it. I find kind of anxious feelings for me are more a mental and stress is more physical in my body. That's how I find it. So often for me, the first thing with stress is my sleep schedule will be the first thing to be kind of affected. This morning I woke up at 6 a.m., even though obviously we didn't have to be here at 6 a.m. So yeah, that's something that's like particularly prominent for me in stress anyway.
Do you know what? Now you say that, I woke up a bit early and there was a dream that just indicated there was a flavor of it. It wasn't even related to this in some ways, but I think the feeling was a little bit of stress, the flavor.
Yeah.
So that told me something actually. And I feel it in my body too. And we're kind of supposed to. It's very much related to the fight, flight and freeze response. So anything that we know about that, we can notice our heart rate going up. We can notice things in our stomach, perhaps in our throat, our mouth getting dry. Stuff like that. Is that ringing bells?
Yeah, definitely. And the stomach for me is so interesting because I went through a very stressful period a couple of months ago with the breakdown of kind of a long-term relationship. And interestingly, it never really happened to me before, but one of the first things that I kind of went through was a massive loss in appetite. And then that affected my stomach in all sorts of ways. And then physically, you're not feeling great because obviously you're not eating what you need to. And I had never experienced kind of that side of stress. So yeah, no, that's something that really kind of resonates with me.
That would be very common. Change in appetite as well. It could be that actually sometimes we can increase our food intake, comfort eat, if you like. So yeah, real classic sign. So I'm sorry to hear you went through that, but obviously that's brought you here, actually, hasn't it, in terms of discussing this topic. So we'll probably get into that a bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
If you don't mind. And then actually I've noticed my sweaty palms right here and now. How are you doing?
I'm doing the same. It's funny how as soon as I saw you doing it, I was like, oh yeah, I can feel it.
Yeah. So it's interesting as we talk about, we can start to be more aware actually of what's going on in our bodies. So some of these things might appear to be just wholly negative actually. And I think that's one of the challenges because stress and anxiety can get a little bit sort of merged, if you like. And I think sometimes it's useful to just create a distinction that stress is often from outside. It is the pressure of life. It's external demands. And it doesn't always mean that we respond in an anxious way, but we can. And anxiety can actually be a condition that can carry on actually despite the stress passing. That can happen, doesn't always. Normally it is quite linked to stress. But, you know, it's worth saying that actually stress is external and anxiety can tend to be that internal response.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think sometimes there's often a bit of confusion, probably, I'd say, about kind of recognizing both the kind of symptoms and how you feel. And obviously, if you're reacting in a certain way to a situation. It might just be like, oh, I'm anxious. And like actually taking the time to recognize that what is influencing you, what's making you feel that way is actually really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the use of the word reaction because it is quite immediate. And to some extent, it can be a bit beyond our control, that initial thing. But then you're also bringing in the idea that we can pause, we can take a step back, try to sort that out a little bit and maybe learn to respond. And in that space, I think we have the opportunity to build and recognize resilience. So if we move a little bit into that territory, we can start to actually see maybe the glass being more half full as opposed to this wholly negative, idea about stress.
Yeah. And I think the resilience is kind of really interesting because obviously there will always be certain situations in your life which you do find stressful, like job interviews, going on first dates, meeting, like making new friends. It will always be kind of a stressful situation, but that doesn't, as you say, doesn't have to be a negative thing.
And it's worth sitting down and maybe thinking of the ways that it can be positive. And there are a few that spring to mind really, because in some ways, of course, we can get a little edge on our performance through stress. That adrenaline. So that's another thing we can feel. It could make us shake at one point actually, but it could sharpen us. Could sharpen our thoughts. We could gain energy in our body through that. Really and truly, that is what we're equipped for in terms of our evolution is to be physically equipped, even for battle, actually. So, hopefully things like this pale into insignificance compared to that.
Go into battle.
Well, exactly. And that's another good thing to do, I guess, is the skill of being able to put things in perspective. There's that thing, isn't there, about whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
I think like the sort of the going into battle thing kind of is very apparent as well with things like assessments and tests. And I know in my second year now we're getting to the point where we kind of have actual in-class exams. So you're building all this stress and then you're going into this hall, you're doing your exam and then you come out and you're like, oh, and it's like all kind of the release. So I know obviously it's not, but it does sometimes feel like that, like you're going into something, you're going into a battle.
Yeah, absolutely. The heart's pounding away and all the rest of it. And so seldom do we actually think of that it's preparing us for action. It might be actually assisting us in some way. And, our breathing, we notice things about our breathing as well, don't we? But could that be that we're actually priming our brains with oxygen?
I've never thought of it that way.
So imagine going into an assessment or something like that and viewing it that way. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, I've never kind of thought of it that way because as you say, sometimes you always tend to see the negative. So you're like, I'm getting kind of this like hyper breathing where you're like, and you're not actually thinking about actually this is an opportunity to get kind of more oxygen into the brain to prime myself. And like, it's just really interesting that kind of refocus on this negative situation into a positive. And on doing that, like what is the best way to kind of build up that resilience after the stress? So like, do you have any tips or anything on like, how do I refocus? How do I, readjust my view on what's kind of just happened?
Great question. And there's lots of this actually on a YouTube video, just to plug something else that I found really interesting. And it's entitled How to Make Stress Your Friend. And it's by somebody called Dr. McGonigal, who's an expert in terms of health psychology. And it's borne out by some research actually that shows that it's not just the amount of stress that we're under that counts, it's our attitude towards it. So this is underlining these things that we can do to what we call reframe, to be able to see not just the negative, but the positive aspects to what we're experiencing. And as I say, that can be difficult because we tend to be just hijacked with those feelings, and then we might have a chance to sort it out. And the skill of actually opening up that opportunity to sort it out is crucial. So you spoke about breathing, Sarah, and I think that's probably one of the first go-tos. Is to notice our breathing. And whilst we accept that it might be priming us with oxygen, there might be a point where we've got enough oxygen, we're fine. So can we actually just calm that down a bit, consciously do breathing techniques? And famously, there are things like rectangular breathing techniques. So we imagine that we breathe in on the short side, we breathe out along the long side, and we might be able to also match this with certain helpful counting in our head. So some sort of ratio like 5 and 8, 7, 11. And we go round and round sort of doing breathing in for 7, out for 11. Do you know what? If we actually get ourselves trained up, and this is why it takes practice, if we can get to 8 in, 12 out, that's 3 breaths a minute, right? Because that whole cycle, 20 seconds, 3 breaths a minute. The changes we make to our physiology are incredible. In fact, we're even going to boost our immune system. Not just calm ourselves down, but we're actually going to boost our immune system. So there are some significant things going on there as well with our kind of neurochemistry as well. And we're learning to focus adrenaline, make use of it initially, and then move on, if you like, effectively. So the actual attitude that we take to stress is more significant even than the amount of stress we're under. Because people who actually have managed to get a healthy and positive attitude to stress, they can withstand high levels of stress than those people who actually have relatively low stress, but they can end up suffering more depending on their attitude. So it's quite an important thing to get to grips with, to learn to embrace it.
That's definitely something that I'm trying to kind of focus on and do a bit more. As I was saying earlier, like you always have stress in your life, like interviews and things like that, but that's a positive form of stress. And I think going through a large negative point of stress kind of did help me reevaluate. And
how?
well, I'd never been through sort of anything like that before. And obviously I found myself in a very different position than I was. And
big change.
And with that, you know, the big kind of external changes and things like my sleep pattern and loss or change in appetite and things like that. And kind of, I was very lucky to have amazing friends who kind of helped and support me.
That's crucial.
So we had a lot of open conversations about it and kind of how I was feeling and things like that. And in doing that, they sort of helped me recognize, you know, the emotions I was feeling and how stressed I was feeling and kind of what that was having on my body and on myself at the time. And that it did just put everything kind of into focus for me a little bit. And things like, I feel I'm a lot more kind of confident as a person now because like things like raising my hand in class and asking questions and answers and doesn't really faze me now as much as it used to.
That's in perspective because of what happened to you.
Exactly. It's all kind of within perspective. But obviously that's not to say that you kind of have to go through this massive event to kind of get there. I think that just kind of put me in a position where I was able to do a lot of kind of the inward work, the focusing, the reevaluation and the readjusting. And I'm kind of grateful and happy that I kind of got to go through that. And now I can kind of thrive and enjoy stress a bit more, which is very weird to say.
There you go. You've got there, incredible as well to realize that you've used gratitude in some way actually to get there. You've reflected, and we do need time actually sometimes to lick our wounds and to learn. But I guess that's the crucial thing is actually to hold on to the idea that we can use a growth mindset to learn from adversity, learn the hard way.
I think even if we look at it through kind of like a different angle, and my friends and I have kind of been trying to do this more after assessments now, where we sort of go into assessment, we do it, and then we have this massive period of stress. We will find that we're having, these days of conversations of people always going through, what did you do for this question? What did you do for that question? And we kind of just had this moment where, I personally was just like, this actually isn't necessarily helping us kind of like in our academics and in our reflection, because we're all just kind of sitting in this stress and we don't really need to be.
It's good to notice and be wary of that.
Definitely. And I think now we kind of allow ourselves to have, we'll have a little time after, as you say, the reflection, the refocus, let's everyone adjust, kind of let's all talk about it, get it out. And then actually from now on, we can't do anything about it. The assessment's over. We've done it.
Yeah.
Let's kind of refocus and try and move on to a more positive sort of light.
Absolutely. The connection bit is really crucial. Many of us really respond well to that and banding together. Sometimes, of course, we need to act and do something. So it's always that balance. But what I also pick out from what you were doing there, Sarah, which I think is incredibly important. And it reminds me of a quote actually from Aldous Huxley. So famously wrote a classic book called Brave New World, but it wasn't perfect. He knew full well it wasn't perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. is the other thing, isn't it? And he was called upon to reflect on his work, and he was wary. Actually, his quote that really hit me is that rolling in the muck is not the best way of getting clean. And to me, it's that caution about, getting bogged down and admiring our mistakes. Why do we admire our mistakes sometimes so much? We sort of dwell, if only we could do that with when things go well. We actually send a message to our brain. We reward it for doing the correct thing, for the times where we responded in a really good way. So if we can shift our recollection, what we talk about, to actually the upside, to those moments where we handled things well. And this is why it's lovely to hear you talk about coming through your adversity, how you've managed to use gratitude and to see it as something in your life that enables you to put other things in perspective and grow as a person.
I think that kind of reflection from coming out of the muck, for me, that screams kind of resilience. That is what that is. It's the ability to kind of get yourself out of that position almost.
Yeah. And give yourself credit. So many times we can get into a beat ourselves up trap.
Yeah.
Whereas you were able to sort of bank that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And take credit for it yourself. You actually turn to other people, quite appropriately. That's an important thing that we actually do for ourselves, though. And it's not easy to reach out, but you did that. So you can also take credit for that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I say I'm very lucky to have some really amazing friends who kind of helped me through. So
the idea that we sort of know who our tribe is, if you know what I mean, and it doesn't have to be a big tribe. That's the other thing. We're under quite a lot of pressure these days, I think, through social media and various things, to have tons of friends, and actually all we need is barely a handful. And to those people, it's important to have a group who have our best interests at heart. They've got our back. And we can turn to them and we do listen to them. And to some extent, do you know what? Everyone else, we can even put our shields up to. They may have their opinions. They may tell us, whatever they think. But actually, we don't always have to take that on board. Not if they're not in our tribe.
Exactly, no. And as you say, it's kind of surrounding yourself with kind of the people who, can't think of the right words at the minute, but the people who, support you and help lift you up.
Back.
Exactly.
They've got your best interests at heart.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So it is quite good to every now and then do a little bit of an audit of who's in that. And, there's no need to be rude or anything to anyone else who isn't, but equally, we actually don't really even need to listen to them sometimes. That's probably also quite a good thing to give ourselves permission for.
Exactly.
So I mentioned this idea that we often get hijacked by these, powerful emotions, these feelings. I've still got sweaty palms, by the way.
That when you're in the moment, the stress. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just happens to us. And to some extent, we don't have much control over that. And there's a book by Professor Steve Peters called The Chimp Paradox that I really like to return to help us to know a bit more what's going on here. And the chimp paradox metaphor, I think, is really useful in that we have an inner chimp. We all do. And it is the one that gives us sweaty palms. In fact, it gives us anything that we don't want or welcome, or any behavior that we do that we don't want or welcome, any thought that we have that we don't want or welcome. So we can kind of make the chimp a scapegoat for quite a lot, actually. It can be useful. But the paradox is that we are responsible for the chimp. And similarly, that we as human beings can go beyond the chimp. So we can check out these feelings. We can alter our breathing in response to a situation because we're smart and we know about the neuroscience and we know about the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is what helps us to kind of rest and digest and calm down. And it's triggered by the out breath, aligned to what I was saying earlier. So we can do these things. And we can think better of what the chimp does to us, which is actually to hijack us for reasons of safety. There is a reason for the chimp. It will get us out of trouble if we walk into a jungle situation or something hostile. We need it because it's fast and strong. But of course, so many times it may be a bit oversensitive. There's only so much chimp that will help us in an assessment.
As you say, like, it's interesting that it sort of comes back to the flight, fight, freeze
Exactly.
kind of response. And
You've got it.
Yeah.
That's chimp stuff.
chimp, all chimp.
Yeah. And to some extent, it helps us to recognize it and characterize it. And the other thing I think you've reminded me of there is your laughter.
Yeah.
And isn't that a real asset to have the ability to be able to laugh and let things go?
Definitely.
Is there anything more you can say about letting things go? Because I think, that's something you know about.
I mean, it's hard, I think, sometimes. I think something you said earlier about giving yourself permission kind of really struck me, because I think sometimes we often feel like we have to hold on to so much. And like, that's kind of where we almost build this kind of outward stress bubble for ourselves, because you're like, well, I have to do all these things and I have to feel this way and I have to do everything correctly.
We can feel trapped by
Exactly.
the tyranny of a decision.
Exactly. And I think sometimes you do just need to give yourself permission to actually just let go of, certain ways that you're feeling. And as I was saying earlier about the assessments and my friends and how we get so stressed, it was actually just, letting ourselves have that moment of stress and then just giving ourselves permission to let it go. You've done it. Let's, push it out into the atmosphere, so to speak,
Yeah,
and kind of let the universe, not let the universe, but you know what I'm saying, like push it out into the universe, let the universe kind of give it back to you. But
why not?
Exactly. I think that's something that the giving yourself permission is something that I think really just sticks with me, because I think a lot of what I kind of went through and what I was dealing with was kind of recognizing, myself and my actions, and actually just giving myself permission to be like, it's actually, what, it's okay. And it's not necessarily your fault. And you can kind of have this time to, move on and things like that. And it's okay to just be like, you can let go and
Absolutely.
be happy.
Because stuff does happen to us in life. You know that
Exactly.
all too well. Any metaphor like the universe one you use, I think is really helpful. And to even visualize that, breathing it out, sending it out there somehow with an out breath. We know that's smart science as well. That's going to help our physiology. Any signal to send it on its way. The location of it in our bodies can also be really useful that far, because we can almost imagine, that we're sort of shedding it out through our fingertips, or all these visualizations I think really help. And allowing there to be a beginning, a middle, and an end to, our stress. So that's what we're equipped with ultimately by having, it's a prefrontal cortex actually, which is distinctly the human bit of us in terms of this chimp paradox.
Mm-hmm.
So, chimp's there, but we can sort things out with this high functioning part of our brain, along with things like having a memory where we can consolidate experience. So that's why it's necessary to have a balance between, reflecting on the past, learning from it in order to move on, but using anything that we can at our fingertips, that we don't get stuck in it, that we don't just roll around in the muck.
You like that one? Stuck in it. I was like, in the mud.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, the idea is to get clean, is to, sort of move on afresh. And that's why things like actually life coaching can be really, really useful as well. So that's another thing, I guess, that leads me on to plugging it from the Counselling and Wellbeing Service. So the coaching service at ARU is much more of a here and now approach. And that's useful in itself to bring us into the moment at times, so we don't get caught up in the past or carried away in the future that hasn't happened yet. And it can also help us to draw on our values, because I'm sure you had some, the values that you have enabled you to have some gratitude, I think, in moving on.
Definitely, no.
And the meaning and purpose we have in life can all help us to withstand some really amazing things. If you think what Nelson Mandela withstood by having 26 years in prison, he was giving up his freedom for the freedom of his people, and he managed to keep going for 26 years on that. So our values are incredibly important.
It's amazing that you bring this up, because I used to live in South Africa. I lived in Cape Town.
Oh,
so
wow.
I have been to Robben Island, and I have seen Nelson Mandela's cell. So
Goodness
again.
me. Yeah. So you could almost imagine what he had to withstand and be resilient to by being in there.
Exactly.
And it is also that business of becoming more self-aware. So whether that's bodily aware of the way we might have some negative thinking traps, that sort of thing. And of course, this whole business of self-care, of maybe equipping ourselves, I call it something like a leaky bucket lifestyle, actually, where we have things going in our life that actually help us to leak out stress all the time, so that we have more capacity when a stressor comes along, because life will chuck something at us. So it is good to have something in our lives to actually prepare ourselves to give us spare capacity, whether that's sport, you with turning to your friends, those sorts of things. So we're all different. Was there anything else that you felt was really, you could rely on to get you through the tough times?
I mean, my friends and family, like first and foremost, have kind of always been a really sort of big help in my life, and they were when I was sort of going through everything. So that primarily, I'm a very big hobbies person.
Yeah.
Crochet, knitting, things like that. I think they really help me focus kind of in the moment. And as you say, they get you out of that kind of bringing things from the past, taking things to the future, so that it's something that will draw you into the moment kind of then and there. And as you say, like, I think with things like life coaching, I go back to the muck, the bucket. It's like having someone sort of help you kind of take a little bit of water out the bucket, or kind of give you a helping hand to stand up in the muck. That's kind of how I see it personally.
Absolutely.
And I just think it's such like a good, great service. Sometimes you do just need a little bit of a helping hand, a little bit of a support system just to kind of lift you up a little bit.
That's right. And, you'd be willing to do that for someone else. So you kind of deserve it for yourself.
110%. And I always think sometimes there's this culture of almost, I'm not that bad, so I don't need help, or it's not that serious, I don't want to take someone's time. But actually, as you say, if someone came to you with that, you would help. So you are, deserving, and you can, lean on someone, ask for help. And it's actually really important. And that's like almost a skill in itself, being able to say, actually, I'm not okay right now. The stress is too much. I need a little bit of help.
Yes, indeed. Like the skill of reaching out and feeling okay with that, whether it's a life coaching service or counselling, where we do have a bit of an opportunity actually to resolve things from the past. Coaching is that little bit more here and now, if you like. But there's also, just to end on a metaphor, which I have used in counselling, and that is almost like the stresses can be like a smoke alarm going off. So I think lots of students know what it's like to be in halls of residence and the smoke alarms going off. So really to take that, and as in lots of halls of residence, I hope there haven't been many fires, but really, let's say, nearly always there isn't. It's burnt toast or maybe someone's smoking, I don't know. And so many times the alarm goes off and it is the chimp getting agitated, really. And there isn't really any, particularly in the grand scheme of things, reason for that. So, and it turns to this quote from James A. Garfield, who actually was a US president-elect. And he says, I'm an old man and I've known many a great troubles in life, and most of them never happened. So it is also one way to put that in perspective. And that's not to decry, of course, those moments where, we genuinely do have challenges in life.
Yeah, as I say, I think that's so kind of apt, because even as you say, walking around today and people being like, it's so stressful, I'm stressed in these assessments and things like that. Actually, when you then go and do it and you're in the assessment, you've done the battle and you take that time and reflect, it maybe was not as big of a deal as you thought it was originally.
Exactly, yeah. And you've done it, and really dwell on those feelings, and how you came through it, identify what it was that helped you through. And that's resilience. Thanks for joining us today to talk about stress and resilience. If you've been affected by anything we've spoken about in this episode, please reach out to the Counselling and Wellbeing team and make the most of the support we can offer you. Visit aru.ac.uk/wellbeing to find out more about our service and how to get in touch. See you next time for a series of guided meditations.